I'm Jules Pieri, and really excited to be here today to talk about a topic that I really care about, and we have two experts on the topic, going global through social technologies and communities. And so I'll be first introducing Ben Silberman, and he'll present an orientation to Pinterest, and then Jeremy will join us on the stage to explain Yelp. And Pinterest is a phenomenon that cannot be believed almost in the US. It has taken the world by storm in its innovation as a discovery tool. It's a very visual tool, and the growth numbers and the sheer affection for the company are astounding. I won't tell you too much more because Ben will give you his own interpretation of the company, but I did want you to know that Ben Silberman, the founder, is from the Midwest, the very middle of the US, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm from that part of the country too. I come from Detroit. And something that most people probably don't realize is that the Midwesterners of the US are really, in my view, the Japanese of the US. And the reason is that in the Midwest, you're raised to work hard, have high integrity, and be very humble. And Ben is a great example of that in that he is a tremendous success, but the number one thing people always say about him, journalists, is he's not the stereotypical, brash, arrogant entrepreneur. He's humble, and that's because he's a Midwestern Japanese.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Well, my name is Ben Silberman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pinterest. And just before starting, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming out and listening to me today. Thanks to Jane and thanks to Mikitani-san for bringing us to Tokyo. It's a real treat for me and my team. It's my third trip to Tokyo, and every time I come, I'm more excited than I was the last time. Pinterest is a visual discovery tool. Tens of millions of people all over the world use Pinterest to discover products, places, recipes, and ideas, all things that they didn't even know existed. And when people discover those hidden gems, Pinterest makes it really easy for them to save it for later, take it with them on their phone, and go out and do those things in real life. Today, I wanted to share with you how Pinterest works and why we're so excited to encourage Pinterest users in Japan. So first, what is discovery? To answer that question, it's really helpful to understand how people have accessed and found information over the last 10 years. And I think everyone in this room probably depends upon search. Search is the most amazing invention. If you have any question and you can say it in a few words, search engines will go out and they'll find exactly the right answer. But we're going to talk about something different today. We're going to talk about discovery. This is how you know about search. If you have a question, like what's the weather in Tokyo, or what's the population of Tokyo, search gives you just one perfect answer. But there are lots of questions that people face every single day where the answer for them might be different than the answer for everybody else. Questions like, what should I make my apartment look like? Questions like, where should I travel on a holiday? Questions like, what should I cook for dinner? Questions like, what should my wedding look like? All of these are questions that are very, very hard to search for, partly because the answer for you is different from the answer for everyone else, and partially because you may not know exactly what you're looking for until you actually find it. And that's what discovery is. Discovery is to come across something unexpectedly. And discovery on Pinterest is to find things that are useful, things that you love from the internet, but you didn't know existed. Unlike search, you don't have to know exactly what you are looking for because discovery is about exploring all the possibilities to these open-ended questions. And this is what we want to do with Pinterest. So, what is Pinterest? Pinterest is a very simple service that started with a simple idea, and it was an idea about collecting. 4 years ago, with two of my friends, I decided I wanted to do something I did as a kid and do it online, and that was collect things. As a kid, I used to collect insects like butterflies, I used to collect stamps, I used to collect coins. And at the time, there were lots of services to put up your writing or your photos, but you couldn't put a collection online. And so that's what we set out to do. We set out to make it very easy to put anything that you collect on the internet online. And not only did we want to let you see your collections, but we wanted to make it really easy to see the collections created by other people all over the world. This is how it works. Anywhere you're on the internet, you can find a small pin it button. And if you push it, you can put it into a collection. In this case, it's a paper butterfly, and I'm putting it into a bigger collection of paper butterflies. And since lots of people like me have lots of different interests, Pinterest lets you have as many of these collections as you want. So these are a few of my own. I love nature, I love maps, I love buying gifts for my wife to stay out of trouble, I love cooking, I love getting toys for my young son. Collection means to gather things together. And 4 years ago, there were just a few people collecting, but today, tens of millions of people, institutions, and businesses use Pinterest to show off their collections. And some people in the audience might find that really surprising. After all, most people don't think of themselves as collectors, but what we learned over the last 4 years is that almost anything can be collected. It doesn't have to be just paper butterflies. When you go to a museum, for example, that's a collection, a curated set of art that someone's put together and organized so you can enjoy it. And now there are thousands of museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Smithsonian's in the United States that add those collections to Pinterest so other people can discover them. If you enjoy cooking and you buy a cookbook, those are collections of recipes, each one picked out by a chef just so you can have a delicious meal. And now millions of home chefs and millions of famous chefs like Wolfgang Puck put their collections on Pinterest so other people can discover them. Even if you go to a store, you can think of it as a collection created by a brand or a designer, a collection that's designed to show you a particular style of clothing that you may not have understood before you looked at it. And American Apparel, like thousands of other retail stores, are adding their collections to Pinterest so other people can find them. Whatever you're interested in, whether it's music albums, whether it's manga, whether it's baseball cards, there are people collecting it on Pinterest. And in that sense, you can think of Pinterest as a huge collection of itself. There are thousands of diverse collections created by tens of millions of people. And if you think of it this way, if you think of what all those collections can do together, that's where discovery comes into play. Pinterest has billions of pins organized into millions of collections. And what we do every day is we try to figure out, within all of those pins and all of those collections, what are the ones that are meaningful to you? So if you enjoy looking at paper butterflies, we can tell you, you might also enjoy origami. You might also enjoy crafts. You might also enjoy mobiles or pop-up books. And if you zoom out farther, we can do this across every collection in the network. We think of our job is to connect you to the interests and passions that you didn't even know that you had. And when we do that, that's how we believe that we can help people discover things all over the world. If you already use Pinterest, you can understand that it can be useful and fun because you can tap into a community of people that have the very same interest as you do. And while some people might think Pinterest is like Twitter or Instagram or Line, it's actually very, very different. Those are communities that are about communicating, about telling stories about yourself so you can connect more deeply with friends or people that you know. But on Pinterest, the community is organizing and curating all of the internet's content while making connections and discoveries through people with shared interests. And this makes discovery on the internet in general much easier. We think that the more people who use Pinterest, the better job that we can do to connect you to the content that we think people would enjoy. And that is why we're so excited to have more people in Japan using Pinterest. As I said, this is my third trip to Tokyo, and every time I come, I'm amazed at the depth of culture in food, in art, in design, in shopping that's present right here in Japan. There are a lot of Japanese pinners already, but we're hoping to grow that number. And the ones in Japan are doing a lot, not only to discover things for themselves, but to share their unique passions with the rest of the world as well. There are people like Masaki Higuchi, who's a notable cook and food blogger and has published all of his own books. he gets inspiration from Pinterest through food and recipes, and that helps him be creative and invent new things. Now it's easy for any user in Japan or around the world to get ideas from Higuchi and try out some of his recipes on their own. There are pinners like Paris Wakana. Paris is a fashion blogger, and not only does she use Pinterest to collect ideas for her outfits, she also uses Pinterest to plan travels on her fashion design, hotels, and suites board. And now, anybody can get travel ideas from Paris from a local person who really understands what's unique to see in Tokyo from the perspective of someone who really loves fashion and design. There are institutions as well. There are institutions like Vogue Japan, who are adding their collections to Pinterest so people around the world can enjoy them. And not only they're adding their collections of fashion, they're adding their favorite places where you can visit in Tokyo so you can know what should I visit, picked by someone who has a very, very specific interest and a very specific point of view. There are companies like Rakuten, who's using Rakuten recipes to share all of the great recipes Japanese chefs are creating with the whole world. And Rakuten, like a lot of partners, is not only showing pins, but they're showing all of the information that you would need to make that recipe from your home, all of the ingredients, all the things that you need to buy. So, as a really young company, we have a lot to learn, but I couldn't personally be more excited to be here. Pinterest is a great opportunity to showcase Japanese culture to the world and help Japan, people in Japan, discover all of the unique food and architecture and tourist destinations and design and fashion right here. Pinterest, at the end of the day, is a visual discovery tool. And we think that we can make it much easier to discover things you love and answer questions that maybe a search engine can't help you answer yet. We're going to do that by connecting you to people who share your passions and interests, enabling them to share all the things that they love in life. And whatever your passion is, there's a place for it on Pinterest, whether it's fashion, or cooking, or travel, or vintage motorcycles. So I hope that you try Pinterest and get inspiration for the things you like to do. I thought in closing, it might be fun to find 2 of our Japanese pinners who are using it. And so I wanted to share a really quick video with you guys about how 2 people use Pinterest in Japan to plan a special day for them, which was their wedding.
ウェディングのフィーリングであったり気持ちに関してですけど、やっぱりかなりDIY、自分たちで手作りっていう手作り感を作りたかったし、
軽くピンタレストでそのキーワードを入れるだけで、過去にアメリカでそんな結婚式をした人のイメージがいっぱい出てきて、
スーツであったりネクタイの色とか、ブーケに使うバラの色、お花の色とか、あとはブライズメイドが着るドレスの色、そういうのも全部こう見ていくうちに、私もだんだんその後からはメイクの仕方とか、髪型をどうするのかとか、どういう靴をすればいいのかとか、そういうのもピンするようになりました。プロがやってるなんか雑誌とかの撮影用の結婚式、そういうのを見て、でも自分では絶対そういうのできないなと思ってる人は結構多いと思うんですけど、私も実際そう思ったんですけど、実際ピンタレストを見てインスパイアされて、で必要なものも全部、すぐ探すことができて、で、実行まで持っていけるっていうのができたんで、それが、今回の結婚式というプロジェクトで知ったことです。
So, thank you very much. Please try Pinterest if you haven't tried it before. And I think with that, I'm going to introduce Jeremy Stoppelman, CEO and founder of Yelp.
Hey, you're taking my stuff.
Sorry.
So Jeremy Stoppelman, he founded Yelp in 2004, so we're talking 10 years. And we heard from Larry Ellison earlier today. It's the truly great entrepreneurs who can take an opportunity and evolve, expand, pivot, grow for 10 years, as Jeremy has done. In 2010, he had an offer of acquisition from Google, and he had this famous conversation with Steve Jobs, who called him and said, "Don't take the offer." And he made the right decision. He actually took the company public in 2012 and has had year after year expanding growth and success as Yelp. And if you live in the US or one of the 26 countries where Yelp operates, it would be your first thought when you want to go out to eat or hire a small business service provider or discover something new in a city. You would be thinking about how to get connected to those small business people through a social community that you can trust, through regular people. So it would be a first stop for you. I can't claim that Jeremy is a Japanese American in that he grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, not the Midwest. So when I think of Alexandria, Virginia, it's just across the river from Washington, D.C. So I'm going to prescribe that Jeremy must be a global citizen. It's obvious that he knows how to operate a global business, and I have to imagine some of that started in growing up in a place like Alexandria, but he'll tell us the real truth when he comes out.
Hello, everyone. All right, I'm Jeremy Stoppelman, one of the co-founders and CEO of Yelp. And what is Yelp? Well, Yelp is a website that connects people with great local businesses. We started in 2004 with the idea that if you could capture word of mouth, capture what other people thought of local businesses, bring that online and make it searchable, you would have the most powerful way to find local businesses. You would change things forever. Because prior to that, all you had was the Yellow Pages, or Town Pages as it's called here in Japan, a book of advertisements. And really, that's not as effective as knowing what do other people think. And so that's the concept we came up with in 2004, and it's become very successful. As you can see here, since our founding, 53 million reviews have been submitted by millions of users. So much rich local content. And with all of those reviews has come a lot of visitors. Such a big audience. 120 million people are coming to our sites every single month to figure out what's the best place to get your haircut. Where else might you want to go? What are the good parks? What about museums? What about shopping? The best boutiques, and of course, restaurants. And this is all now happening on mobile. When we started in 2004, there were no smartphones. Smartphone revolution had not even started yet. But in 2008, with the launch of the iPhone and the iPhone App Store, Yelp was able to have an app at the store at the time that it opened. And it became very successful. And Apple got behind it and put it in iPhone commercials. And it's gone on to great success, as has our Android application as well. In fact, over 50%, 59% of the searches happening on Yelp are happening now on mobile. So we've really become a mobile company. Stepping back a little bit, some history about me. I was born, as you heard, in Virginia, right near Washington, D.C. My background is in engineering. I was a computer engineering major at the University of Illinois, the birthplace of the internet browser. Netscape, Mark Andreessen came from University of Illinois as well. I then came out to Silicon Valley as a young engineer. And I was hired by Elon Musk, who is then part of X.com, which became part of PayPal. And so I was an early PayPal employee, engineer, and then later manager and vice president of engineering. After PayPal was acquired, I went on to business school at Harvard for a year. And in between my first and second year of business school, that's when the idea for Yelp came, when we saw this incredible opportunity, me and my co-founder. And once we started the business in October of 2004, it was only until 2005, middle of 2005, that it really started working in San Francisco. People started contributing reviews, we were building up local content, and the business started to take off. And so that's enough about me. What does Yelp look like? This is actually a profile page on Yelp. So this is my personality on Yelp. It's a place where I can put all of my reviews, all of my thoughts about local businesses. And over the last 10 years, I've done so. I've now written well over 1,000 reviews. It's been a lot of work, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly. And I continue to write reviews, as do millions of other users. Which brings me to this next thought, which is that Yelp is really about its communities. And what does that mean? Well, every city There are people that love to share their opinions about local businesses. They love to talk about their favorite restaurants. They love to talk about a store that they discovered in a back alley. And it's wonderful for them to have a platform to share this information. And so in every city now, we actually have over 150 markets. Every one of these places, we have a community manager. That person is very unique to Yelp. And what they do is they're an ambassador. They're a full-time employee of Yelp, and they're an ambassador for Yelp in cities across the world. And as people connect on Yelp and right through sharing reviews, they also have a desire to meet up in real life. And the community manager enables this. And we throw events in all of these cities all over the world constantly. Every month and a half or so, there is a Yelp event. So right now, somewhere, there is a Yelp event happening in the world. What does this mean for businesses? Well, all of the reviews, of course, help point to the really great businesses. So if a business is delivering great value, great service, if they're wonderful to their customers, it ends up getting reflected on their business page. People can learn about it. And so it takes this word of mouth, takes what's in people's heads, and it amplifies it to the rest of the internet world. You can find businesses like you've never been able to find them before. Even in weird locations, strange places, you'll find the most amazing local businesses. It's truly wonderful for the community. It's truly wonderful for the people that are searching. And it's incredible for the business owners who suddenly see more business coming in the door. So the reviews are shown on their page. Photos can be added both by business owners as well as the community. And businesses can also add information about themselves, their history, their specialties, anything they want people to know. Yelp has now grown all over the world, and we want to be everywhere. We want to be in every country, in every city. We want to see the impact that it's having go far beyond our humble beginnings in San Francisco. And you may notice that there is one dot on this map that is particularly big, which is right here in Japan. And as of this morning, I am very excited to announce that Yelp has finally come to Japan. It's been many years in the making. I've been here 3 times. I love the food, I love the culture, and so many people back at Yelp headquarters this morning were so excited to flip the switch and turn on the site and the apps that we have been building for so long. And so to show you a little bit more about how it works, I've actually got a video that will explain it and show someone using Yelp right here in Japan.
家からもオフィスからも、そして外出先からも、Yelp は皆様と素敵なローカルのビジネスをつなげるとても便利なツールです。東京にある公園を探してみましょう。あなたが行きたいと思っている場所に行けるように、検索結果はリストと地図の両方で表示。
This is a Japanese version of Yelp. You'll be able to find parks and restaurants, and if you search, when you click from the other Yelp users, you'll be able to review some of the posted new pictures and also reviews. Yelp mobile application. For all the users, you'll be able to easily find what you are looking for. In terms of the recent adjacent gift shop, there are a lot of options that will be listed up, and you'll be able to see the same result on the map. And when you utilize mobile application, depending on the business owners, you'll be able to find the operating hours and the pictures and the detailed information, and also some of the review and some of a few description from the reviewers and also from the owners. In Japan, at last, you'll be able to use Yelp application.
The mobile applications, thank you so much for your time. It's great to be here.
So we heard earlier today from Prime Minister Abe and also from Ambassador Ruse about entrepreneurship in Japan. And one of the questions that I always get asked about that as an entrepreneur, but mainly as an entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School, is how do you know if you're cut out for that world? Should I start a company? And Jeremy, you gave us a bit of your background, so we had a sense of your path to entrepreneurship. But Ben, yours is interesting and quite different. So if you could just back up and share with the audience how you got here to this point of founding Pinterest.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that
I was a very reluctant entrepreneur. My family are all doctors. Both my parents are doctors. Both of my dad's parents are doctors. Both of my sisters are doctors. And so I think my parents were really hoping that I would do medicine as well. But I felt like it wasn't for me. And so instead of starting a company, I thought maybe I should learn more about technology. And I ended up eventually working at Google in customer support. And I think that my path to starting a company was a little bit accidental. I don't think I ever had an idea that I wanted to have a big company or have a lot of people kind of working at the company. I just really wanted to build a product and see other people use it. And so I think that for me, everything started from there. I just wanted to build a product that people around the world would enjoy. And then because I think I was in Silicon Valley and there were a lot of people that were very encouraging, that slowly kind of built into the company that Pinterest is today.
And Jeremy, you had the opportunity to watch other entrepreneurs. Did that help or hurt? Is it intimidating to be around founders, or did it give you the confidence to do what you did?
I definitely think it was inspiring. You know, the magic of Silicon Valley was when I came in to interview at this little company called X.com, which later merged with PayPal to form kind of modern day PayPal. And in my interview, I met Elon Musk, who had already been a successful entrepreneur, and yet he was only 28 years old. And at the time, I was maybe 22, 23. And that opened my eyes. I'm like, wow, here's someone who's already a veteran entrepreneur, and he's only a few years older than me. Like, that's so exciting. And he's got his own company. He's got venture capital behind it. He says he's going to take on Visa and MasterCard, these payment giants, with this little tiny company. And that's, for me, that was magic. I was like, this, I want to learn from this person. I want to see this. I want to see where it goes. And someday I want to do this.
But even still, in 2004, social, if I remember back then, Facebook was still, just getting going. Social as a phenomenon was not a phenomenon, really. Yet you had insight that you could change discovery of local businesses, level the playing field for local businesses through a fair kind of arbiter, being a community. How did you figure that out?
I guess it was a bit accidental, back to Ben's point, which is often the case. I mean, we were really thinking about, in 2004, we were saying, okay, there had been the dot-com bust, like the first internet wave was over and it ended badly. And there hadn't been a lot of investment, especially in consumer internet. No one was really working on that. And so we started thinking about pretty broadly, like, what could be the next big thing on the internet. It's 2004. We feel like the world is still wide open. We have this new platform, which was set back by a few years because of the fallout of what happened, post-internet bubble. And so we started just looking at a bunch of different ideas. And the one that stood out, or the thing that I think pushed us in the direction of local, was we saw that Craigslist, this classified site, was transforming the world of newspapers and how they ran their business. They used to make a lot of their money from expensive classified listings, and Craigslist was not entirely free, but close to free. And so that got us starting to look at what other traditional media businesses might be vulnerable to disruption by the internet, which hadn't quite been disrupted yet. And the one that stood out was Yellow Pages, or Town Pages, as I understand it's called here. And so we started thinking about, well, how do we create something better? And I think, immediately we jumped to word of mouth. Like, we all like to ask each other, hey, Ben, where do you get your haircut? It's a nice style. I like that. And if we could build a site that somehow captured that type of information and made it searchable, that would be incredible. And so that was the problem we focused on.
So you guys just described two really different paths to entrepreneurship, and the two that I observe most often. Jeremy, you described, it sounded like an itch you had to scratch. You knew that there was an opportunity. You knew you needed to be an entrepreneur. And right now, and that was unusual at HBS 10 years ago, actually. I see now the students feel tremendous social pressure to start a company. Like, they come in and I have to talk them down from it if they don't have an idea yet that they feel worthy. But you you had this itch, and so it feels to me like you were probably somebody that was born at some point and realized that you had to be an entrepreneur. But Ben, you describe yourself as a reluctant entrepreneur, and there's a professor at HBS who calls that an entrepreneur by necessity. Somebody who sees an opportunity and can't not do it, or a product they need to build, or a service or a problem they have to solve. And in your case, the way you went about solving it through a fantastic user experience, being a user, understanding what you would like, and some of the stories about how you started are legendary, about the 22 fully functional, attempts, prototypes to get started. Could you talk about that? Because some people believe that entrepreneurship always has to start with a technical insight, but you really started with a life insight, a problem, and a design insight.
Sure. I think for me, one thing about me is I just really love the internet. I don't know. On the weekends after work, I download other applications. I love using them, not because I'm trying to use them for my business, but I really love it. And Pinterest was funny because it was the 4th or 5th time I tried to start a product, and it was finally the one that clicked. And I think each time that I had started a product, it failed for a different reason. Sometimes it failed because it wasn't designed well. Sometimes it failed because we didn't build it technically properly. Sometimes it failed because we didn't kind of get enough attention to it to get it started. And with Pinterest in particular, we actually knew exactly how it would work quite early on. But every time we looked at it, we sort of, in the early days, didn't think it looked very good. And we thought, well, no one's going to create a collection if they don't even think it looks good. And so my co-founder, who was a designer by training, he dropped out of architecture school. He used to work on buildings. He and I spent a lot of time just trying to make it look really good. And I think that most great consumer products have some very simple human insight baked into the very foundation of them. Maybe that insight is they want to share knowledge, or they want to help you express yourself or help you communicate more easily. And if you can, I think, latch onto what that basic human insight is and then pull it out and make that the centerpiece, that's where most great consumer products come from. And I think it's been such an exciting last 2 or 3 years. You've seen companies like Line, WhatsApp really take a very basic insight and really kind of deliver an amazing product at huge scale very, very quickly. And that wouldn't have been possible just a few years ago.
How would you describe your basic human instinct?
I think there are two things. I think one is people are very curious about the world. They love collecting things in some form or another. I also think that not only are people curious, but I think people everywhere are very creative. Not that many people get a chance to be a designer or an artist or a writer, but I think deep inside of everyone is this feeling that they want to be creative, and if you can give them an idea that makes them feel creative, they'll really enjoy that. And I really believe that. I think most people are born creative, and at some point in school, they're taught that they should ignore that. But if you can unlock that and give them an idea, then they'll do it. And their creativity might be writing a review on Yelp, or cooking, or picking out really nice clothes to wear. But I think that is kind of a basic insight that Pinterest is built on. Mm.
So Jeremy, you're known for effectively expanding into new markets. 26 now, Japan today. Congratulations. And if I were to open your playbook for that, the parts you can give away today, what's been the secret to that? How have you managed? Because local is local, and yet you've adapted brilliantly to 26 markets.
Yeah, the funny thing is, for our model, it's always been this one city at a time approach. I think to be useful in a local market for actual people that live there, you really have to get a lot of things right. You need really high quality local data. You need locals to actually participate, not just tourists. And that takes a long time. And so we've spent many years investing in cities. I mean, it was probably 5 or 6 years before we really got to the depth of content that made the average New Yorker say, yeah, Yelp is good. I use Yelp all the time. And for an internet company, that is a turtle's pace. I think it's been fast. But compared to some other successes that have reached the world a lot faster, it may seem a little bit slower. But I think that's the nature of local, and that's why there hasn't been any overnight successes really in local that have sustained as we have. So that's really been the story of our expansion, is city by city, and with that also you have to pick countries. And so for us, Canada was the first obvious choice for internationalization. It's a lot easier in a number of ways than Europe, and we've long wanted to come to Asia. And our first step was actually Singapore because it was English language. But then Japan has unique hurdles because of handling the character set, the unique challenges in search. And so there was a bunch of extra work, but we have long known it's a very attractive market. I mean, I was just here a year ago with Mark Benioff from Salesforce, who was constantly berating me, constantly yelling at me, saying like, "Why aren't you in Japan?" And so I came along on a trip with him, and I met with all the potential partners that we could have in Japan, and that for me did crystallize it in my head that this was a place that I think would, one, take to Yelp, and it had so many great cities with so much local knowledge that could be shared. It would be an incredible market for us, and so I wanted to see what would happen. And
well, what scared you about Japan beyond the language, which would be formidable? What else about it that do you anticipate to be special, unique, or difficult?
I mean, historically, Japan was seen as a unique cultural market for U.S. companies. Like I remember, during my PayPal days or the time that I briefly overlapped with eBay, there was a perception that somehow Japan was different. Anonymity, for instance, was critical. And so, for instance, when Facebook started expanding internationally, there was this belief that Facebook wouldn't work in Japan unless they changed something because people won't use their real identity. And it took some time, maybe a couple of years, but then all of a sudden Facebook became extremely popular. And so I think now the conventional wisdom is Japan is a great market where a lot of U.S. companies have been welcomed and have seen success. And so especially seeing that up close over my last couple of trips, like it became clear to me that the product will work.
So you'll come back in a year and tell us how it really is here in Japan?
Hopefully. I will come back triumphantly and say, look at how wonderful it is. I mean, it takes longer than a year. So I think in a year, it will still be early days for us. But I think by the time the Olympics come, we will hopefully be a household name.
Great.
That's our challenge.
Write that down, folks. 2020. So Ben, you're in over 20 countries, correct? Pinterest, is that correct?
Yeah, we started translating kind of midway through last year.
Mm-hmm.
So there are more than 20 languages, and it's growing in those languages.
So are there any quirks, differences in the types of behaviors, the things people like to collect from country to country?
Well, I mean, I would say two things. First, it's early days for us, and so I don't know if I can say confidently. But yeah, of course, different countries have different interests. I think that's the fun part about Pinterest, that people all over the world have very unique things that they care about. And more, I mean, the thing that I think is so cool about the internet is that the things that you care about don't have to be dictated by where you happen to live or where you happen to have been born. There are kids growing up in Iowa, which is not the most kind of international city, who love Japanese baseball teams, and they can access that on the internet in a way that wasn't possible before. So I'm sure there are differences that we're going to learn about, but what I tell my team a lot is that we focus a lot more on the things that make people the same across the world rather than the things that make them different. Because if you can really get the things that everyone shares in common right, if you can make the product very simple, very easy to use, that'll often get you farther than making it different for every single market based upon your assumption of what's special or different about that market. I've never been to a country where people want slow products or complicated products. Right. Every country wants those things. They all want quality. And I think that you see that again and again. Really high quality products spread globally over time.
So Pinterest is extremely visual, and it is the calling card. It's the lead of Pinterest. And I've read that visual images can be processed 60,000 times faster than words, which makes it, you're talking about people like fast products, endemically, it's a fast product to appreciate everything that's happening there and not be overwhelmed. But you really innovated that. You really created that sense of collection, of future planning, and the specific visual presentation of the product. And it drives me crazy to see so much imitation of Pinterest. It's flattery on one hand, but it worries me a little bit for you. How do you stay ahead, or do you not even think about that?
Well, I mean, I think that in general, products are becoming more visual. I mean, it's being driven by the fact that everyone has a great camera and a great screen in their hand all the time. So that won't change. I think for us, what we focus on is not just that it's visual. I think that's very important to us, but that's not unique. We try to focus on helping you find the things that you care about the most. And there's a lot that goes into that. I think when new interfaces or technologies come out, there's a tendency to lump them all together. It wasn't that long ago when people were like .com business, right? A commerce business, a search business, they're all .com businesses. And I think that as the businesses mature and evolve and become more specific, people will start to understand all those differences. And what we want to know Pinterest to be known as is the best visual discovery tool, the best place to discover things, to plan your future, to get inspired. And that is both about presentation, but that's also about how we connect you to people and things that you care about.
Jeremy, Yahoo, you have a deal with Yahoo. How's it going? Tell us about it, and how's it going?
We have a number of deals. So one of the more recent ones announced was with Yahoo US. And like a lot of other companies, they've realized that our content is particularly unique and helpful if you're trying to solve the local search problem. And so now they exclusively use our content to power their local search product. We have a similar deal that's been in place for a number of years with Bing and Bing's local product. And in fact, we're willing to share our content with anyone where it makes sense. So it extends all the way to Apple. For a number of years now in the US and Europe. We're the exclusive review content provider, both in Apple Maps and Siri, and even car manufacturers like Honda, Toyota, Lexus, Mercedes, and BMW have all incorporated Yelp content. And I think what that points to is that obviously in Europe and the US, Yelp has really become the leader. It's the de facto choice. It's the obvious choice for local knowledge. And we want to get that into the hands of as many people as possible. Our purpose is to connect people with great local businesses. And so when these large companies come to us and say, hey, can we leverage your reviews and build a great product or service, we want to help. And so it's been very exciting to see some of these deals come in over the last few years.
Can you frame Yelp platform for us, e-commerce?
Yeah, so that's a relatively new effort for us, but a very exciting one. And it comes out of this idea of wanting to close the loop with local businesses. So Yelp is a very horizontal platform in general, meaning you can find any kind of local business. It's not just in one category. And so people, the millions of people, 120 million people that come every month, they're shopping, essentially, just like Rakuten, except they're shopping for local products and services. And so unlike the online world, where if you find a product you like, you can just buy it and it shows up at your door, in local, you generally can't transact. You kind of stop at the discovery process. And that was frustrating to us, frustrating to me, and we wanted to change that and create a way for partners to plug into this Yelp platform and enable transactions of all different types. So it started with restaurants. The first deal in this direction was with OpenTable, which does reservations. It's since extended to food delivery services. So we have two different companies in the US, Eat24 and Delivery.com. And actually yesterday, we just announced another large partner in the US called Booker.com, which does spa services. And so now all of those things can be essentially purchased. Transaction can happen on the Yelp platform without ever leaving the site. And so as we layer in more and more of these services, the idea is it becomes kind of a one-stop shop for anything local, where not only can you find the business that you want, but you can get the transaction either started or actually close the transaction, walk in the door, and have a wonderful service.
And it's new enough that I assume it's not a lead revenue source, but it's assumed to be meaningful down the road. That's the reason, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, so certainly there is revenue that's coming from it, and it's growing super fast. So that's exciting. But at the end of the day, advertising is our core business, much like for Google. You know, most of the revenue flows, the vast majority of the revenue flows from advertising. You know, we're in the search business too, so the vast majority of our revenue comes from selling ads to local businesses. And we're currently doing that in 8 separate countries, but with, of course, the majority of that portion coming from our efforts in the US.
So, Ben, I would say your primary currency, rather than cash right now, is the happy hormone. I think it's called oxytocin. It's it's studied, and I see women who are the primary, at least in the U.S., early adopters of Pinterest, talk about using Pinterest and feeling markedly happier while they use it or after they use it. And I think you've already touched on why that would be, because when you're not talking about the past or the present, but rather the future, the better you, the better food you'll make, the better vacation you'll take, the better room you'll design, it makes you happy. So you're very rich in that currency. But people, well, first of all, do you agree with that? Do you think that that's your primary currency? That's my perception.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's not long term. It's hard to pay salaries and server costs with happiness. But I definitely think that that's something we take really seriously. I mean, we care very, very deeply about how people feel while they're using the product, because I think that when people are in this mindset of discovering things in their future, it's a very easy bubble to pop, right? If they run into someone that's very judgmental or that makes them feel very insecure about who they want to be, that process will not work. And I think a lot of, especially the early days of the internet, was marked by a few bad apples, a few bad seeds, really destroying the experience for the majority of people. But I think there are ways to sort of build products that minimize that. I think it's important.
So let's talk about real money then. You know, people do also, maybe not as much your users, but the business community sees money basically dripping, potential for revenue dripping off of Pinterest at every turn. And you've navigated really well with the corporate presence through rich pins. I'm curious how you've done that so well, and talk about the future revenue plans, because you have started to talk about that, your concerns, your aspirations for that.
Sure. I mean, I think that, to understand how we plan to make money, it's best to start with exactly why people use it. And we've talked about it a little before, but people literally use Pinterest to discover things that they want to go do later. Those could be products, they could be places they want to visit. And that means that for them, businesses are an integral part of how they plan that. Like I love photography. You can't love photography without also loving cameras. You can't think about where you want to go on vacation without thinking about where you're going to stay. And so there have been a lot of so-called social services where it feels a little bit awkward sometimes. Like you're talking with your friends, and on the side of it, there's an advertisement. But on Pinterest, even before we had any advertising products, people would already proactively choose to follow businesses because people like brands. They like businesses. They're part of how you do what you do in the future. So this year, we're starting to give businesses the ability to promote pins, which are basically our version of advertisements. We'll target them based upon what you're interested in. I think if we do a good job, they'll make the experience better. And I know a lot of people say that in the online world, and there's a little bit of skepticism around it. But I mean, fundamentally, brands, products, services, like those are ways that people navigate through all the choices they have in the world, and come up with things that they care about. And so that's our plan for now. And we're just at the beginning of that. We've just started testing that with kind of a small handful of advertisers. And what we're really trying to figure out is that balance. How do we make it so it makes the user experience better, and how do we make it so it delivers very good value to the advertiser?
This is a question for either of you. I don't know if you see it this way, but I see a kind of healthy subversion, a healthy power to the people aspect of both of your businesses. How energizing is that to you? Is that important to you?
Absolutely. I think part of the inspiration around Yelp was my own experiences with local businesses. I had a personal bad experience with a dentist well before I ever started Yelp, and that stuck with me. That, here was a dentist that I felt like didn't treat me fairly, might not have been the most honest person, and I wanted to warn the world and let other people know, what had happened, and that would help the wider community. And there was no outlet for that prior to Yelp. I mean, even the services that came before Yelp were mostly focused just on restaurants. And so that stuck with me. And so this idea that, whatever your experience is, you can share it with the world. And that will make the world a better place because, one, business owners are getting feedback. So they're able to tune and improve their business in a way that never happened before. Two, business owners that are already doing a great job are rewarded tremendously. I mean, we have story after story of business owners that come to us saying, like, my life has been changed by Yelp. I'm in this little corner shop. Nobody ever knew about me. I had my customers for 20 years, and now I have more business than I can handle because so many people are talking about me on Yelp. And then there's the protective side, the consumer protection angle, which is, hey, this business owner isn't doing a good job, and it's actually hurting society. It's hurting the community. And people want to let everybody else know so that we can deal with that problem. And I think that's a very powerful tool that just frankly didn't exist before, had no good way of existing prior to the internet. So I'm a fan of the internet, and I'm a fan of putting this consumer power into the hands of the people.
So, Ben, I was at an event recently where the moderator said that if he left the room and the panelists were still speaking to him, that he had failed if he hadn't made them angry. So I ask you a question that might make you angry, probably won't. But women brought Pinterest to the party, for sure. And I'm really curious how that's reflected in your executive team or your board. What percentage of your direct reports are women or your board?
So, yeah, in terms of like our team, I think a lot of senior positions are held by women. Our head of finance, head of product design, kind of across the board, there are like a lot of strong women. And I think that's not only important at the leadership level, but that needs to like trickle down through the organization. I think people, especially in the US, are rightfully focused on the fact that a lot of women are underrepresented in engineering and in technical fields. And that's something that I think about a lot. Like I have two sisters, they're both in medicine. My mom is a surgeon, so we try to create an environment where gender is a non-issue, right? It's a non-issue at all. And that actually takes a little bit of work in an industry where a lot of women are in the minority. So I think that's really important. And I think it's important not just because Pinterest happens to be used by women. I mean, I think it's also important because we're very interested in having the world's best talent, and half of the world are women. So if you create an environment where it's not friendly to half of the world from a purely self-interested standpoint, even outside of obviously the social importance of everyone having a fair chance, it's just not a good idea.
But how many of your direct reports are women in your team?
Let's see, head of recruiting, head of finance, head of manager of product design. So I'd say 3.
Out of 6 or 7?
Well, like 8 or 9.
Not bad. I mean, the U.S. is not a shining star in this, but Japan's really thinking about this a lot. Prime Minister Abe talks about it, that if women were fully deployed in Japan, that the GDP would accelerate something like 15%. It's a really important issue. It's still an important issue in the U.S., especially in where you guys live, where you're getting slammed over the terrible bro culture, the bro tech culture. Is it something that you've had to address as well, Jeremy? Is it something you think about?
It's definitely something we think about. I think company-wide we do pretty well. where we have a very large sales organization. There's a lot of women in that organization. We have a large marketing function with community managers, and so a lot of women and women leadership there. Management team sort of numbers sound pretty similar to Pinterest. On the board, we have 2 women, which is a bit unusual probably for public companies. So we're certainly doing our best, and we're trying to make it a non-issue. And there are cultural elements. I think if you don't think about these things, then the corporate environment or the environment, the culture within your company can slip into a culture that isn't encouraging of women or excludes them or keeps them at arm's length. The one area where there just is a serious problem, I think, for Silicon Valley, for anywhere, any technology company, is when it comes to software engineers. And I think that's not necessarily a function of bro culture as much as like the numbers are just, we do a ton of college hiring. That's where we get most of our engineers. And if you look at the numbers of women that are currently graduating, it's just there aren't very many. And so I think the problem, like you do have to be vigilant culture-wise, because you have, say, a group of engineers that is mostly men, and if you're not on top of it, then the culture can become poisonous. I think we've seen some of that with, in the news media. GitHub recently had some sort of controversy about culture. But I think we really have to be asking questions about, how can we help steer young women into this field at an early age and destigmatize it as something that maybe, boys are supposed to do, or I don't exactly, I have no idea exactly what is pushing women away from that career early on, but it's definitely before graduation, because it's not like we have 50% or anywhere close to 50% graduation rates of women in CS programs. I mean, at least when I was at university, maybe it's gotten a little bit better, but when I was at University of Illinois, I think it was like in a typical class that I would take in computer engineering, like 2 women, 3 women out of 100.
It's actually declined quite a bit in the last 10 years. It's gone the wrong way.
Yeah.
But separate new topic. You went public in 2012, and we have Alex, who went public last week from O-Power, successful IPO. 2 years later, what would you tell Alex? What would your advice to him as a public company CEO be?
Well, the best advice is probably before you go public, we should have had that conversation. Because after you're public, it's, good luck. But, I think there are certain types of companies that do well as public companies, or do well at least for a period of time. And those companies are typically have fairly predictable earnings. Like if you have good visibility into how you're going to do over the next year, you generally aren't going to have, and your business is healthy, you're generally not going to have a big problem with Wall Street. Like that was our story, is like for many years we've had really good revenue visibility. We know if we hire this many people, we're probably going to do this amount of revenue on the sales side, and we've got a financial model that's fairly predictive. And so we were fortunate in that we came out and really haven't had a whole lot of bumps. And also it's about just setting expectations, both in if you're the CEO, are you going to be dealing with Wall Street all the time, or are you going to pass that off and have your CFO be the primary voice to Wall Street, and making some of those decisions and then being extremely consistent. Because the thing fundamentally that spooks Wall Street is change. They're not good with change. They're not good with uncertainty. It's hard to put into a model. And so the more on a solid footing that your business is, and the more consistent you are in your communications and how you present all the information, the more comfortable everybody is, and the higher level trust there is, and then the easier it is to be a public company.
Is this in your future, Ben?
Is what in my
An IPO?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I think we have a long way to go. We just started building our ad product. I mean, I will say that, like, internal in the company, we don't really talk about that very often. We just talk about how do we make the product better for more people around the world. And I think we have a long way to go before I'll have a conversation with Jeremy about what are the things that we should consider.
Right now you're managing a tremendous number of investors, and that community, or that very intimate community for you, what tips do you have for people maybe in your situation, managing a bunch of VCs, tons of capital?
I I mean, I think that the most important thing is try to find investors from the beginning who understand where you want to go with the business and buy into the long-term vision. And that's not just what the vision is, but that's also the time return on that vision, because investors get their capital from different places. And if you're operating on a idea that you're going to return in 10 years or 15 years, and they're operating and they need a return in 12 months, even if both people go in with good intentions, that's going to cause conflict. So I would say that's important. And then I think beyond that, I think ask questions when you need help. And usually you've picked investors who are more successful than you are. And we try to ask questions when we need help.
So I'm going to ask you one last question, each of you, and it's a one-word answer. What one thing are you each working on to be better at? Japanese people, I have a perception at least, you're always striving to be better, to master something, to improve. I think that's pretty American too. So what one thing are you trying to be better at?
I'll go first. Guitar.
Ben?
I mean, I'm like a new dad, so I'm trying to get better.
Is it sleep? Get better at sleep?
No. Just be a better dad.
Good answer. Okay, well, thanks. I think we hit our time limit. But thank you very much, Jeremy and Ben.